We curated 108 years worth of team and player data for this vintage hockey series, which we sourced from Hockey Reference. This quick hit video focuses on a subset of that player data, which we used to create a new metric called the Enforcer Production Index, EPI. The EPI is a weighted metric that uses a player's points per game and penalties in minutes per game. There are two steps to calculate the EPI score. The first is to calculate the points per game by the penalties in minutes per game, and the second is to create the weighting for the score. The metric is weighted by the total number of games played, because in earlier eras, the number of games played was lower than in later eras. The EPI is a simple representation of players who were enforcers, by virtue of having high PIM, but were also able to get points on the board. We'll explore two EPI trends. The first is across the 5 eras we defined in the first newsletter in this series. The second is across all seasons in the 108 years of data we collected for this series. Viewing trends by era is a useful place to start. You can see where there might be significant differences at the higher level. To do this, we first calculated the average EPI for each of the eras and plotted with a column chart. We included a trend line to see how EPI trended across the eras, and interestingly, we found it declined over time. Note that while it declined overall, we did see the expansion and Great One eras higher than the others. The differences in the EPI score across the 5 eras can be attributed to various historical and strategic changes in the NHL. The league has evolved in terms of gameplay, rules, and the roles of players, so each era witnessed a different style of play. Viewing EPI by season gives you more detail on what happened within each of the eras, which broad averages can sometimes obfuscate. Here, we can see that the early years were very high as compared to the later years, even though the overall average was lower than the Great One era. You can also see another increase in EPI around the 80s, when point production was very high, as was physicality. To whittle the 108 years of hockey players down to a top-ranked list, we took the top players from each era and then ranked in descending order. We then created a top point-producing enforcer heat map, which you can see here. The heat map is useful to identify how each player arrives at a higher or lower EPI score. To get to the top 5 balanced EPI scores, we can filter for those above the average points per game and penalties in minutes per game, sort by EPI, and take the top 5 players. Interestingly, the top 5 played in 2 eras, early years and Great One, and the top 3 played for Pittsburgh in the late 80s and early 90s. And all but Paul Coffey played wing. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, like, and notification button. And check out datapunkhockey.com for more great hockey and hockey analytics content.